Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a 9-game slate here on the NBA for DraftKings and FanDuel. So we're going to start with DraftKings here. We have Memphis over Portland, Philadelphia over Orlando, Washington over Detroit, Boston over Brooklyn, Golden State over Minnesota. Then we have Oklahoma City over Houston, Sacramento over the Spurs, the Jazz over the Raptors, and the Suns over Atlanta. So we do have some injuries that we do have to care about today, so that's going to come into play here. Let's go ahead and get into that injury report here. So for the Orlando Magic, currently we have Carter Jr., Isaac, both questionable, and Okeke is out. Obviously, if Carter Jr. was to miss, that would open up potentially Mo Wagner and probably some others as well, even maybe Bol Bol. And then for the 76ers, we have Embiid questionable. Obviously, if he misses, that would open up usage for Harden and Harris and even Maxey. He would probably slide in the starting lineup, I would guess, and maybe even open up Harrell if he was to start. Then we're going to look at the Trailblazers. They have Winslow out, which was just been something that's been current. And Nurkic is probable, but he is likely to play today. He played last game as well, so I expect him to continue to play. For the Grizzlies, we have Bane questionable. Obviously, with Bane, he opens up more usage for Brooks, and with Adams already out, he should also open up some opportunity for Tillman potentially if he starts, or Brandon Clark, depending on who starts there in that game. Then we're going to look at the Nets here for Warren, Simmons, and Durant are all out. All those guys are definitely opening up more situation for Royce O'Neal and Joe Harris, as well as Seth Curry, though Seth Curry has been very streaky. Claxton remains a great option, and then Deron Sharp even got some run in the last game and had a big game. So all those guys have potential as a result of those injuries. For the Boston Celtics, Smart is out. That gives upside to Brogdon and also maybe to White as well, though they are pretty high priced now. Then we're going to look at the Thunder, and we're going to look at Dort being out along with Paveski and JRE. Basically, with Dort out, that gives more uses to Giddey, and sometimes it puts Wiggins in the starting lineup and also gives some upside to Isaiah Joe, who played okay last game, and then puts the Jalen Williams guys. There's two of them on this team. Puts the small forward version into the starting lineup as well. So look for those guys to be somebody to look at. Then for the Rockets, we have Porter Jr. and Green out. This opens up more for KJ Martin and also Eric Gordon, and also even some for Jason Tate, who really hasn't had a huge game yet this season, but maybe he'll continue to play more minutes. And with those guys out, that definitely gives him some opportunity to do so. For Minnesota, we have Gobert and Prince are both questionable, and Towns is out. Obviously, if Gobert were to miss, that would open up some Naz Reid potential, and also Kyle Anderson and Jaden McDaniels. But if he plays, that doesn't really help that as much. If Prince were to miss, that would definitely open Kyle Anderson up, though, some. And then even with Towns already out, that obviously helps as well. So then for the Spurs, sorry. For the Spurs, we have Vassell out and Langford is questionable. With Vassell out, Sochan has really been taking the reins there, but Bates Diop has been starting. Sorry if I'm butchering your name, and he's been playing really well. So I look for him to be a good option on the slate with those injuries, especially if Langford gets ruled out. And for the Toronto Raptors, OG Anunoby is out, which has been opening up Achua and Boucher, as well as Gary Trent Jr. and Scotty Barnes. We'll just have to kind of wait and see if there's any more injury situation there. And then for the Phoenix Suns, we have Booker, Payne, and Shamet out. And all that just opens up Chris Paul and Mikal Bridges, as well as Cam Johnson and Ayton. You could even look at Craig as a potential option as well. So lots of injuries today, but let's go and get into the plays that I like the best overall on the slate. We're going to go ahead and start off with our most expensive option here is Chris Paul. Now, Chris Paul has played really well with Booker and everybody out, and the last few games his usage is high. His price has finally come up over 8,000, but he's still very viable here. He has a nice upside, and he has a pretty high floor for this particular game, especially against a team that's relatively not that tough defensively. Then we're going to look at Fox. for Sacramento. He's been playing really well, but he's been inconsistent. But he's had 4 games in the last 5 that have been way above what he needs here. And his price has actually come down a little bit, which is definitely nice. I think he got close to 9,000 for a little while, but being around 8,000 is a great place for him to be, especially in the plus matchup against the Spurs. He's one of my favorite plays on the slate. I do think he's a core play at this point, but with injury situations, there could be opened up better. D'Angelo Russell obviously could be opened up as well. He's had some really good games. Lately, he's had some down games as well, though. But his price has popped up a slight amount with all the injuries to the Timberwolves. Mikal Bridges looks like he's in a great spot to have a really good game here. He's a core play today, the way he's played since these injuries have happened. Though keep in mind his price is pretty high, and he does have a pretty good floor, though. So his floor is right around 30, and obviously needs 35 to 5x, but he has 50 fantasy point upside in this matchup against Atlanta. Then we're going to look at Rudy Gobert. Now, he is questionable today, but if he does play, he's been playing really well in the games he's played. His price is still just too cheap for his potential. Obviously, he has big time potential, and he's had, I think, 5 or 6 games straight with double-digit rebounds, and as long as he can continue to do that, this is definitely a game where he could, with the Warriors shooting lots of threes and stuff. So then we'll look at Achua for the Toronto Raptors. He's been playing pretty solid as with OG and OV out, and I expect him to continue to do that, though his price has popped up quite a bit, so he's no longer a core play, but he's still a value play on the slate. Then we're going to look at Mike Conley for Utah. Now his price has risen up a little bit, but he's been playing extremely well lately. He does have a lower floor than you would definitely, than maybe you would like, but he's playing a full complement of minutes. Excuse me. He's playing a good amount of minutes and shooting the ball a lot and getting assists and stuff like that. So overall, he does get some nice upside here, but he does have a lower floor than some of the other options on the slate. Then we're going to look at Alec Burks, who's played really well with the injuries to the Pistons. He should continue to play around 25, 30 minutes a game right now, and as long as he's doing that, he's definitely viable. But if some of those injury situations clear up, then he would definitely lose his appeal pretty quickly. But as long as he's in the starting position, then he's good to go. Daniel Gafford, probably one of my favorite centers on the slate for DraftKings. He's played really well lately. He did take a game off last time, but he looks like he's good to go in this one, and assuming he does play, he will be a core play for this lineup. So overall, I think DraftKings looks really well. There's a nice balance between the more expensive guys and cheaper options. Obviously, you could pay up for Curry or Shea Alexander or even Joel Embiid if he ends up playing, because they're all in good situations, but I do think that it's kind of a good slate to kind of mix and match, 8,000 guys with, $4,000 or $5,000 players. So it should be a good way to make a lineup today. Should be lots of different ways you can make good lineups today. Plenty of games, plenty of good players playing. So, but yeah, so let's go ahead and get over to FanDuel. So with FanDuel, I don't love it as much as I like DraftKings, and we're actually going to start with Joel Embiid. He seems like a pretty good play, assuming he ends up playing. He's just been absolutely dominating, but his price is obviously super high. But he is questionable today, so if he does play, though, he will be viable on the slate, but do keep in mind that he is questionable. Shea Alexander also looks really interesting against Houston. His price is pretty good here, and he's had some really good games lately. He does have some nice upside, and he has a pretty high floor. He really hasn't been below 40 fantasy points since the middle of January, so I expect him to continue to play well, especially in a plus matchup. Chris Paul, one of my favorite plays on the slate here on FanDuel. He has played extremely well the last 5 games since he's been back from injury, and I look for him to continue to play well. He's got nice upside here. His floor is pretty high, and he's got a pretty ridiculous ceiling as well. He has, double-double potential and triple-double threat, at least at some aspect, most of the time. So I think he's a great option on the slate. Mikal Bridges really looks good today. He has played extremely well with the injuries to the Suns. I look for that to continue here. His floor is in the high 20s, though, so do keep that in mind on FanDuel. But he has some nice upside, and his price is still really solid for what he's been doing. D'Angelo Russell has some nice upside today, assuming that Gobert misses. But if he doesn't miss, then it would definitely hinder him a little bit. He has been benefiting from all the injuries to the Timberwolves, so we'll have to wait and see a little bit, but I still think he's viable on the slate regardless. Malcolm Brogdon looks really good here on FanDuel. He's actually a lot cheaper on FanDuel than DraftKings, and with Smart being out, he typically gets more usage, and his price is still really fair here on FanDuel to make him useful on the slate in a matchup against Brooklyn. Then we're going to look at Alec Burks. Who is a little bit cheaper here on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings, and that gives him some viability. He's played really well the last few games, though he does have a low floor, so do keep that in mind. But he does have a good ceiling when he does start, and he has been starting, so we'll have to wait and see to make sure he ends up starting. But I do think he's viable on the slate, though he is relatively scoring dependent, so do keep that in mind as well. So we'll have to see how he goes. As long as he's in the starting lineup, he does typically somebody to take a look at. And then Seth Curry finally for the Brooklyn Nets. He's a little bit cheaper here on FanDuel. He's played really well off and on, but he is very scoring dependent. He should get more minutes with the injury situations going on with the Nets with Simmons and Durant out. But again, sometimes he just doesn't play well or doesn't shoot the ball very well, and that gives him a very tiny low floor. But if you need value today, he is somebody to consider as a streaming option on this slate. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments, questions, feel free to leave them below. And have a nice day, guys.